Word today concerns the family of Oscar-winning actress Julia Roberts. Her half-sister, Nancy Moats, was found dead in her Los Angeles home after what was later ruled an accidental overdose. The family issued a short statement calling themselves shocked and devastated by the loss. For decades, Julia Roberts' smile has been one of the most recognizable images in the world. That smile sold romance, sold comedy, sold the idea that some people simply glide through life charmed and untouched. She became America's sweetheart, one of the wealthiest and most celebrated actresses on the planet. But underneath the warmth that made her famous was a family history marked by loss after loss, the kind of grief that never makes it onto a movie poster. The hidden weight of Julia Roberts' childhood. Julia Fiona Roberts was born on October 28, 1967, in Smyrna, Georgia, the youngest of three children born to Walter Grady Roberts and Betty Lou Berdemus. Her older siblings, Eric Roberts and Lisa Roberts Gillen, would both go on to careers of their own in entertainment. Eric as an actor, Lisa as a writer and producer. Both of Julia's parents were tied to the performing arts. Her father co-founded an acting workshop in Atlanta, a school where, according to family accounts, a young Martin Luther King Jr.'s children once took classes. Her mother worked as an actress and drama coach who had studied the craft seriously long before starting a family. Performance was not a distant dream for Julia growing up. It was simply what happened in her house. But the household itself carried tension beneath the creative energy. Her parents divorced when Julia was 4, and the school they had built together did not survive the split. Betty Lou soon remarried to a man named Michael Moats, a relationship she later described as one of the most painful decisions of her life. That marriage eventually ended in divorce as well, but not before it added a half-sister to the family, Nancy Moats, a woman whose life would later intersect with Julia's fame in the most tragic way possible. Then came a loss that reshaped everything. Julia was only 10 years old when her father, Walter Grady Roberts, died of throat cancer at just 43. The man who had built an acting school from nothing, who had planted the idea of performance in his children before they could fully understand it, was gone before Julia had finished grade school. Losing a parent that young rarely announces its effects loudly. It tends to work quietly, shaping decisions and instincts for decades afterward. Before Hollywood found her, Julia briefly worked ordinary jobs to get by, including a stint selling shoes. After moving to New York City to live with her older sister Lisa, chasing a modeling and acting career with no guarantee it would ever take off. Becoming America's sweetheart. By the late 1980s, Julia Roberts was impossible to overlook. She appeared in Mystic Pizza in 1988 and Steel Magnolias in 1989, and both films revealed a quality audiences hadn't quite seen before, an intensity of presence that made viewers feel personally seen rather than simply watched. Her performance in Steel Magnolias earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress before she had even turned 23, along with a Golden Globe win that same year. Then came Pretty Woman in 1990, and everything changed overnight. The film, about a wealthy businessman and the woman he hires as an escort, became the highest-grossing release of the year, pulling in well over $460 million worldwide on a modest budget. Julia Roberts became the most recognized actress on the planet within a single summer. Scripts poured in. Magazine covers followed one after another. The public fell in love with her smile, and Hollywood fell in love with what that smile could do at the box office. The films that followed only deepened the connection. My Best Friend's Wedding in 1997, Notting Hill in 1999, Runaway Bride that same year. Each one landed with audiences for the same underlying reason. Not because the characters repeated themselves, but because Roberts brought a genuine emotional honesty to every role, something audiences responded to even when they couldn't name exactly why. What the public didn't see during that meteoric rise was what was happening behind the scenes. Fame arrived faster than most people could process, and it came with a level of scrutiny that left almost no room for private missteps or ordinary human error. The wedding that never happened, and the marriage that came before it. Long before her name became attached to Kiefer Sutherland, Julia Roberts had already been married once. In 1993, she wed country singer Lyle Lovett after a brief and unexpected courtship. The two had met on the set of the film The Player and married only weeks later, surprising fans and the press alike. The marriage lasted less than 2 years, ending in divorce in 1995, and Roberts has rarely discussed it publicly since. Her relationship with actor Kiefer Sutherland became far more publicly dissected. The two became engaged in 1990 and were, by every account in the entertainment press, the golden couple of early 90s Hollywood. Just days before the scheduled wedding, Sutherland called it off, amid reports linking him to another woman. The humiliation was both intensely personal and inescapably public. Invitations had gone out, plans were already in motion, and the entire industry was watching when it fell apart. Roberts later described the period afterward as one of the loneliest stretches of her life, one she had to process while cameras waited for her reaction. She eventually found something steadier. In 2002, she married cinematographer Danny Moder, whom she had met while filming The Mexican 2 years earlier. At the time, Moder was still married to someone else, and their relationship drew its own share of tabloid attention before the two eventually wed in a quiet ceremony in Taos, New Mexico. Unlike her earlier, highly public relationships, this one was built deliberately outside the entertainment machine. The couple now has 3 children, twins Hazel and Phineas, born in 2004, and son Henry, born in 2007. But even a stable marriage couldn't shield her from what was still ahead. The accusation that shook the family. February 2014 became the month that broke something in Julia Roberts that professional success could never repair. Her half-sister, Nancy Moats, was found dead in her Los Angeles home on February 9th at age 37. The cause was later ruled an accidental drug overdose, and she left behind a note. Nancy had shared a mother with Julia, but had a different father, and by the time of her death, she was engaged to be married and working as a production assistant on the television series Glee. Nancy had spent years navigating what it meant to be connected to one of the most famous women in the world without that connection ever translating into real opportunity for herself. The relationship between the two sisters had grown strained long before Nancy's death, and the note she left made that strain public. She wrote that her mother and her famous siblings would inherit nothing from her death except the knowledge that they had contributed to the deepest depression of her life. She named Julia directly. What makes that accusation so difficult to sit with at any distance is its specificity. Nancy wasn't vague about who she held responsible. Whether that perception reflected the full truth of their relationship or was shaped by the distortions addiction can create in how a person understands the people around them is something impossible to settle from the outside. What is certain is that those words existed in writing, and Julia Roberts had to read them, and then find a way to keep functioning in public life. 20 days after her sister's death, Roberts sat for a previously scheduled interview with the Wall Street Journal. Reporters in the room described watching her visibly struggle to find language for something that had none. What she managed to say, in essence, was that it was still too raw, that there were no adequate words yet, and that she was getting through it hour by hour. She leaned heavily on her mother during that stretch. Betty Lou had moved in with Julia's family in the aftermath, and a source close to the family described them as clinging to each other the way people do after a shipwreck. A second loss, 1 year later. Julia had barely found solid footing again when 2015 took something else from her. Betty Lou Berdemus had been diagnosed with lung cancer back in February 2013, the same general period when Nancy's struggles were intensifying, meaning the family had effectively been carrying 2 crises at once for years without much public awareness of either. Betty Lou eventually moved into Julia's home in Malibu, spending her final months surrounded by her daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren rather than in a care facility, a choice that mirrored the same instinct for closeness the family had leaned on after Nancy's death. On February 19, 2015, just 5 days before that year's Academy Awards ceremony, Betty Lou Berdemus died at age 80. Julia did not attend the Oscars that year. Losing a parent roughly 12 months after losing a sibling under such painful circumstances created a compounded grief that few people ever have to carry at once. Sometime after what would have been her mother's birthday, Julia posted a photo to Instagram of herself wearing a bracelet engraved with a single word, Betty. The cause behind Hollywood's biggest smile. Professionally, Julia Roberts became one of only a handful of women in Hollywood history to hold the title of highest-paid actress in the world. Around the time she won her Academy Award for Best Actress for playing real-life environmental activist Erin Brockovich, a role that required her to abandon the romantic comedy likability that had defined her earlier career in favor of something rougher and more grounded. She was commanding roughly $20 million per picture, a figure that made her the first woman in the industry to reach that number. The film itself became both a critical and commercial success, pulling in well over $250 million worldwide. The years that followed showed an actress willing to take real risks rather than repeat a formula. She joined the ensemble cast of Ocean's 11 in 2001, held her own opposite a roster of established male stars, took on morally complicated material in Closer in 2004, and showed a completely different register in the sharp spy thriller Duplicity in 2009. Later, she returned to warmer, ensemble-driven work in films like Eat, Pray, Love, August, Osage County, Wonder, Ticket to Paradise, and the Netflix thriller Leave the World Behind. Proof that even decades into her career, she was still choosing projects on her own terms rather than chasing what had worked before. Along the way, industry commentary occasionally questioned whether her box office pull was fading, particularly through stretches when expected hits underperformed. She responded the way she always had, by choosing interesting work over safe work, rather than trying to recapture the exact audience she'd had in her 20s. Off-screen, Roberts has spent years as a goodwill ambassador for UNICEF, work she has kept relatively quiet compared to her film career, focused on children's health and education initiatives around the world, a detail rarely mentioned alongside the more sensational chapters of her personal life. The woman she has become. Julia Roberts turned 58 in October 2025. She has now been married to Danny Moder for more than 2 decades. Her twins, Hazel and Phineas, are in their early 20s, and her son Henry is a teenager. The life she has built with her family is deliberately unglamorous compared to the career that made her famous. She has spoken in interviews about the specific relief of ordinary activities: cooking, reading, simply existing somewhere that doesn't require performing for anyone. The grief she carries remains real and permanent. The father she lost at 10, the half-sister whose final written words named her directly, the mother who died just over a year after that, following months of caretaking inside the same house. Those losses don't stop belonging to a person just because public attention moves elsewhere. What has shifted with time isn't the weight of the grief itself, but her relationship to it. The raw, unfinished language of those early interviews about Nancy has given way to something quieter. A bracelet with a single name engraved on it, an Instagram caption that says nothing more than that she misses her mother. That simplicity isn't suppression. It's grief that has been lived with long enough that it no longer needs elaborate explanation. Her children were young when Betty Lou died, old enough to understand that their grandmother was sick and to absorb, in whatever way children do, the sight of a parent grieving. Roberts has often credited her mother as the person who taught her everything she knows about parenting, a woman who raised 3 children largely on her own and, when asked how she managed it, reportedly answered with dry honesty rather than sentimentality. That same directness has shown up in how Roberts talks about her own family since. There's a reason the phrase, America's sweetheart, has clung to Julia Roberts for more than 3 decades without ever fully letting go. It was never only the smile, striking as it is. It's that the smile has always coexisted, visibly, with something else underneath it, an awareness that life involves real difficulty and a decision to keep showing up anyway. That lightness was never accidental. It was chosen deliberately again and again. The story of Julia Roberts at 58 isn't a single dramatic event, and it isn't a tidy tragedy built for entertainment. It's an accumulation: a father lost too soon, a broken engagement played out in front of cameras, a sister's accusation she could never fully answer, a mother's death that followed close behind, and, running underneath all of it, one of the most successful careers any actress has ever built. Money and fame never covered the cost of any of it. What they gave her, instead, was a platform, one she has used, quietly, to keep choosing meaningful work and to keep her family as private and as close as her public life allows. Julia Roberts gave audiences unforgettable films and one of the most famous smiles in entertainment history. But behind that smile is a woman who has absorbed loss after loss and kept moving forward anyway. Not because the pain wasn't real, but because she chose deliberately to keep going. Her story was never really about fame. It's about resilience and about what it actually takes to keep smiling through heartbreak.